Hey guys, Akio Murasaki here. Today we're going to be talking about VTubers and uniforms, yes, especially the more militaristic ones. The reason why I would like to talk about this in this video is because it does affect all of us VTubers in a way, but it also affects the broader anime conversation and a kind of brain rot trend that has been going on, especially on Twitter, and I would also say Reddit, where basically any form of badass looking uniform is instantly compared to Nazis and Hitler. And therefore, I feel like you really need to have this conversation because the general lack of nuance is making everyone's lives more difficult, and especially the lives of VTubers such as Zentreya, and the life of essentially anyone who's online and who in any way engages in kind of like more, militaristic looking presentation. And there's going to be quite some uniforms I'm going to be showing today, quite some VTubers as well. I personally do not intend to have a kind of uniform model in the future even, but I thought it's relevant. It's one of these, we really need to dissect the problem and we really need to have this conversation so that people have at least some kind of reference, in one place, and so that people don't lose their minds as much as they've been in the last couple of years. Because there's been a lot of over sensitivity on these topics, and it is, as I said, making everyone's lives way more difficult than it really needs to be. So everything started with, of course, Zentreya's new uniform, new costume, new model design, as you can see here. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It really plays into Zentreya's themes, like the dragon themes that she has been using for many, many years, even in her original model and in her, I think, later, at least the one that I remember, the dragon model. That works very well for her, but also we have some other elements. We have quite some, other elements also typical for Zentreya. We have the black, the white, the coat here, and we also have the red, as is of course the case for her. But this is a military uniform, okay? This absolutely has to be said. It has a way stronger vibe than I think than the previous model, but it's still absolutely beautiful, and I'm happy to see her get this kind of revamp, and I think the designers themselves did an absolutely amazing job. But unfortunately, there's quite a lot of people that are not happy with this uniform, and we need to read some of these comments and dissect them to understand what really is happening and whether these people have any real bone to pick here. So we have this Raven Looks person that says, okay, so as a history creator, you're going to see similar phrases very soon, even more than that. There's quite some quote-unquote history creators, history costumers talking about this. A lot of people with like quote-unquote expert knowledge chiming in. I think you need to squint really hard to not see parallels between Zentreya's outfit and the black SS uniform designed by Carl Debunking. Is Zen a Nazi? I don't think so. I think anime overall has a weird fixation with this aesthetic. No, I don't think this is gonna come up later, so I'm just gonna say it right now. It is not that anime has a fixation with this aesthetic, but that the specific aesthetic of uniforms designed for the Nazis, designed by Carl Debunking, but also by Hugo Boss, for instance. Yes, that Hugo Boss. Who has been supposedly a member of the Nazi party as well. They have designed uniforms that were supposed to be both elegant, comfortable, but also incredibly imposing. And the colors they used were typically grays, blacks. There was supposedly also a white uniform that is included in, I think, I'm just going to spoil it right away, in Azure Lane. There are white uniform variants of the kind of Nazi-inspired uniforms. But in general, if you look at actual Nazi uniforms, and I'm glad that a person even brings that picture here. Yes, there is a specific aesthetic, but as you can see here, these ones contain way more black, way less red, and they do contain insignia that are very, very indicative of kind of typical Nazi uniform. I want to say typical Nazi uniforms. not like 100% typical Nazi uniforms, because not every single uniform, not every officer would be wearing the red armband with the swastika, for instance. But also speaking about armbands, since we're at it, armbands are also a thing, for instance, in Japanese schools, or at least used to be from what I've seen in movies and anime, similar to the hair clips and also clove clips to kind of indicate that a student is a member of a certain community. So these insignia are not like, the armband is, for instance, not unique to Nazi uniforms, and also not all of the uniforms did actually feature the armband. Here, I'm not a history expert, unlike a lot of these people claiming to be here, so I can't really say this, but that's at least what I remember, and that's what I've personally seen. Now, this person, Levine, is of course digging a little deeper. They do mention that some of the inspirations seem to be coming from Azure Lane, as I've already mentioned, from Bismarck, the battleship. And yes, of course, if you look at if you look at Zentreya's uniform, yeah, it's quite clear that there are some inspirations here. But again, here is the thing, unlike, for instance, this Raven person, is it problematic? And the person says, I'd say so, yes. Why is it problematic? Is it problematic because it invokes the same vibes? Or is it problematic because there are some tangible but not necessarily unique similarities? And this is the thing what I want to get into with some of the conversations people have been having, some of the posts they've been sharing. And as I said, this person says, I think anime overall has a weird fixation with this aesthetic. That is not true. There are some anime, some stories, like for instance Tanya the Evil, Youjo Senki, that draws from the First World War. And if you look at Youjo Senki, you will notice that some of the uniforms are very clearly World War I uniforms, and they have absolutely nothing to do with Nazis. And despite that, people are still watching Youjo Senki, people are still seeing Tanya in various fanfics and in various clips online, and they say, oh, this is lolly Hitler. It's not, okay? And this is where we're trying to get in here. So we have one of the people here, Podge, who supposedly is a professional costume designer, who tries to go into the details, the aesthetic, blah, 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 etc. It's a very, very long post. But they're basically saying, which I think, again, I disagree. The bottom line is, you can't separate the design from its history, not matter how much you may want to. You can. You actually can, because these designs are actually used in multiple other military uniforms. They have been used in Russian uniforms. They have been used, the insignia, for instance, the placement of insignia, the strength, the symbolism has been used in uniforms, different uniforms actually, around the entire world. To the point that you will even see them in police uniforms. Yes, you will see them in, for instance, German. I also did a bit of my own research. You will see them in German. I think I've seen also in Austrian, not entirely sure here, but for sure in some of the German police and additional service uniforms, you will definitely see these overlapping themes. So, can you separate the design from its history? Well, I would say you better do, because it's also relevant that we do separate the design from history, so that we stop bringing this similarity up all the freaking time, because it's really tiring and has been annoying both to Zentreya and has also been annoying to a number of people online. Because any combination of red, black, and white and some form of insignia instantly is going to bring people saying, oh, look, it's lolly Hitler or something. Where it's not. Like, please, people, learn your history. We'll get there as well. But we have more people, for instance. We have Hayazame Haru here, for instance, which ironically has a black-white hat in their avatar. It says, I'm graduating soon in Bachelor's of Entertainment and Multimedia, and character design and animation is our thing, so I'm dropping my 2 cents here as well. the entire argument 100% falls apart when you realize that Nazi's more iconic white variant of the uniform, as I mentioned already, exists as well. Yes, it does exist as well. Yes, so it's not only the black and some portion of red, the insignia. No, it's also the white uniforms, and white uniforms are used in the Navy, for instance, and other places in the world. Yes, they're used in the Navy. So again, this really falls apart. Like we have this, for instance. Yes, of course, they're brought up in Azure Lane. Yes, of course, specifically for the Iron Blood faction. But again, this is a little different than, let's say, this. Okay, both white, both have insignia. Are you now gonna compare all of this to Nazi uniforms as well? Really? Like really now? No, right? And so we have more people chipping in here. All of you guys are saying that Zen's outfit is akin to Nazi outfit or Donbass, so here's your history for y'all to think of. And yeah, it's based on Azure Lane's Bismarck. That makes sense. Doesn't fit any World War II or post-World War II aesthetic. Instead, it was going for the generic anime military aesthetic. I have to disagree a little bit, because I think what they did with Azure Lane, they really wanted to invoke some of this specific aesthetic. But again, this is completely fictional. The faction in Azure Lane, the Iron Blood faction, for instance, it is only vaguely inspired by the Nazis, by World War II Germany. There are some elements, like the cross, for instance, which are vaguely inspired, but they're not the same thing. They're kind of like an anime element at that point, right? And then third, the general aesthetic of Wehrmacht World War II and SS dress uniform is still found to this day in the great majority of military dress uniforms, as I mentioned, also in the military uniform, in the uniforms of other services, so not necessarily just military, the police as well, and other services are also using similar elements in their uniforms. And here is the punchline. If generic anime military aesthetics are somehow something you relate to Nazism, then Come at Me for my uniform might be closer to one that Zen's ever could be. And I'm assuming this person here, whose uniform is a military uniform, but that is basically it, I would say. Lord Commander of the United Civilized Armies. Okay, well, I mean, commander of an army has a uniform. The end. Like basically, there's there's not much more to go here with, it has nothing to do with Nazis, honestly. What else do people say? Secondly, it's a uniform style. It is. Uniform style has absolutely nothing to do with actions were taken by those wearing the uniform. And again, this is true. You are going to see a similar aesthetic probably with other content creators as well. Again, this, at this point, is just maybe inspired, sometimes very likely inspired, but has absolutely nothing to do with Nazis. And also, this is something I found interesting. There's a mention that this is actually the Prussian military uniform style, which I can totally understand. Unfortunately, I do not have the historical background to comment on that. But also, what's worth pointing out is that the boys' school uniform in Japan is also heavily influenced by the Prussian military style. So again, we have one more type of uniforms that has some inspiration in history, but has nothing to do at this point with Nazis. Okay? I think this should be clear at that point, right? And I'm not going to go into more details of what people are saying, but also very much worth pointing out. The kids keep forgetting Zen's has been around since the first wave of YouTubers in the States back in 2018. I really thought it's earlier than that, but okay, fair enough. And this is one of her previous models. Yes, this is Zen's previous model. I do remember. Not this one specifically, but I do remember the style of models. I think some VTubers actually still use them. Oh, I do remember Kirsche Verstahl did use kind of the similar kind of early 3D model for a very, very long while. But anyway, We live in a society. It's important to point out here. And we have one more here, which again is kind of like a little better 3D version of the earlier uniform that she supposedly had. And this person here, Hellhound Dex, mentions her new model is an updated version of her legacy model from 5 years ago. It is not based on Nazi attire, and Zen is not a Nazi. Again, this is what it is based on, and again, I want to make it super clear. It is based on an anime approximation of a specific aesthetic. Does it have any kind of far-off resemblance to the original Nazi uniforms? Yes. Is it directly inspired by Nazi uniforms? No. It's inspired by both anime, it's inspired by Azure Lane's Bismarck and other more anime-esque uniforms. So again, has nothing to do with Nazis. And I think it's nice of Hellhound here to bring up the fact that this supposedly was Zentreya's old model. Because interestingly, I don't know what the conversation was back then, but what I do understand from the posts is that these problems did not exist 5 years ago. How very interesting, isn't it? So 5 years ago, we never had this weird conversation of like, this military uniform is basically Hitler. We never had these conversations. What changed, right? I am seeing a lot of this brain rot coming into online spaces and especially Twitter, where any resemblance to anything from that time period or even from an earlier time period that is a military or military looking uniform is supposedly somehow related to the Nazis. I really don't get this. And so of course there's a mention of Bismarck here again, and I'm surprised no one caught on to this one. Yes, this is one of Hakos Biel's earlier costumes. I don't think I've actually seen that one in action in one of the streams, but I can sort of understand how that would be specifically picked because of Iron Blood in Azure Lane as well. You can really clearly see the similarities here. But yeah, somehow I'm not sure, it doesn't seem like no one has ever criticized Hakos for this outfit specifically. Well, I wonder why that is the case. It must have been a while back then, right? Where people who are watching VTubers or interacting with VTubers were the actual fans. And we didn't have this weird brain rot problem that is going on nowadays, right? It does really seem that way. And of course, then more VTubers started chiming in, like this one here, for instance, Crimsy. I just want people to know I'm not a Nazi. Lol, my hat is supposed to symbolize Canada's Royal Canadian Air Force. As you can see here, you have the emblem here, you have the crown. You have gray, you have black, of course, you have red. Here is the General Air Force here, as you can see here. Here's, for instance, the entire model. Does this look like a Nazi uniform? No. And that is the entire point. It does look like a fairly strong military uniform, but it has nothing to do with Nazis. And so basically, closing thoughts for this entire topic. I wish people would think a little longer before they start accusing other people with kind of weird historical or bad or fascist associations. On one hand, it is of course incredibly rude towards Zentreya and other content creators, but I think it's in general very problematic because it creates this atmosphere of fear, even I would say, and like weird resentment. When now, for instance, Zentreya is going to have a lot of unnecessary discussions with some anti-fans and supposed fans who have been watching Zentreya for years and now are discovering that Zentreya is a quote-unquote yikes, oink, iffy, bad person. Yes. And that is what seems to be happening a lot online nowadays. So I really, really wish we could go back to normal. Please, guys. Control yourselves a little bit out there, huh? Alright, that's it for this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Mata ne!